Fit for Life Radio, episode number 201.
I didn't know if you had it.
The brain power.
We hadn't talked about it.
Running strong. Back at it, podcasting. Today, we're going to get into the Netflix documentary.
You Are What You Eat.
You Are What You Eat. And specifically, when we're doing a research review of that, we actually had one lined up that was the study that the documentary was based on, right? But we're going to dive into that because we always, obviously, a lot of people watch Netflix.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions on it.
One thing before we get going, some baby update.
Let's hear it.
You know what's wild is, like, because I was making goo goo gaga noises at you, saying I speak fluent baby, but I do speak fluent baby.
You feel good about it, like you know?
Dude, I found you can hear, like, they have little noises they make for specific things. And then I found there's this thing called Dunstan baby language. It's like a whole construct made, and dude, it's accurate. It's wild. Like, so their thing was, and this
is this like an intrinsic, like a biological thing that all babies do?
It's got to be, because and when it clicked was
I didn't know if it was something some guy just made up. You know, he's got his own baby language.
Maybe like they piece it together, but so NEH nah 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 nah, that kind of cry. It's like I'm hungry. EH is burp me. That's the one. So I couldn't get him one time, bro. And he kept making, and I'm like, he's making a different noise. It was the and so I like freaking went to the burp, and then he got like this huge belch, and I was like, damn, that was, because sometimes you just resort to, like, if you're not paying attention, you're not, like, you just try to feed him with everything, but sometimes that's not the answer. And I was like, then this big
what
belch.
If you brought up your phone and you're like, Google, translate.
Like, then EAIRH or EARGGGHH or more of an E is gassy or need to poop. And then
you gotta really be listening,
dude. But that's the thing, right? Like, I would say that too before I ever was around a baby.
Yeah, and then you just hear everything.
But nuance, right? You can do it with your dog, I'm sure, right? Where
I know it all,
and
know what it all means.
But it's just wild. And then once I found this, I paid even more attention, and they're all pretty spot on.
Damn, I never even thought about that. Now every time I hear a baby, I think I know what you're saying.
You start talking back.
I think I know. Dude, that's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then there's like a OWH, it was like, I'm sleepy.
I do that same noise when I'm sleepy. Every night.
That you just... Mm-hmm. But yeah, so there we are. So I'm speaking fluent baby.
Little baby noise.
Putting that on the resume. English, Pig Latin. And Dustin.
Can you actually...
Dunstan baby language.
Can you actually speak Pig Latin?
And
as his brain short circuits.
Unse, eaker is that?
Yeah, there you go.
That's Sunseeker,
there
right?
you go. All right, you got it down. I got to check, man. I can't have you throwing that around and you can't actually do it if it's on your resume.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Pig Latin, speaking of language, let's talk the language of Netflix documentaries.
There's a new one every year.
Is that Pig Latin?
Specifically,
nutrition documentaries.
These food documentaries are...
And the bugaboo of it all, right? So, again, we're going to unbiasedly break down the actual review that the documentary was based on, and then go into some of what you have to look out for, right? Ultimately, on its surface, if you're going to watch these things, they're entertainment. That's fine. Cool. But don't go change your diet or make food decisions based off of documentaries. This one's easy, right? Because at its core, and I think most people can relate with this, documentaries need money to go, right? And the very strong message of this documentary ends up being like vegan.
Yeah, vegan diet is best.
Vegan diet, right? Well, the funding was sourced by so the producers were the same producers as the Game Changer documentary, which also was vegan slanted, and those producers owned like pea protein companies and stuff, right? Which is a plant-based protein powder. And then also in this one, the lead researcher with the study, it was funded by Beyond Meat. So
a vegan company.
It's in the research paper. Yeah. Like they sell the
meat substitutes.
And so it's hard because it's like it's going to be if the research was funded by something like that, they're going to have a conclusion that they're wanting, right? So, you just have to know that stuff, and that's why I want to make decisions based off of it.
Yeah.
And then what you see with this documentary is, which we'll go over, some of the benefits, right? But then they also don't mention
the drawbacks.
The drawbacks that were in the study. They also then kind of fabricate some things to make
it seem like it's even better,
more glorious, right?
Yeah.
So what are those things, right? So that's the first thing that I always look at with any lens. You want to know that. And then, so the study in the documentary was basically, the study was a twin study, and they went to test where they had twins. So obviously, identical twins, 22 pairs. One twin follows a vegan diet for 8 weeks, and another one follows a omnivore diet for 8 weeks. And then see, how they compared.
What happens?
Yeah. And then in the documentary, they basically follow along with one of, the pairs of twins. It was through Stanford University. Average age was 40. All of them were healthy, well-educated. 30 of the 44 had at least a bachelor's degree and relatively lean. Average BMI, basically 26. One twin from each pair was randomly assigned to follow a vegan diet for 8 weeks. The other was given an omnivorous diet. It was a well-put-together study. Obviously, twins have the same DNA, and they also grew up in the same environment. They gave, a lot of times the hard thing with food environments is it's hard to control.
Yeah, and it's hard to get people to report all the things they did.
So with this, they did have the meals delivered to their homes for the first 4 weeks, and then gave them access to a nutritionist for any help they needed when shopping for and preparing their own food in the final 4 weeks.
That's actually really good.
Really good, but it still also means in the second half, it's up to them.
There's still variables.
And they're also not controlling for exact amounts, right? Mm-hmm. So you can eat more or less, which can affect a lot of things. Only one participant dropped out of the study due to their work schedule, which meant their twin had to drop out. So they ended up essentially with 42 participants, 21 in each group. Now, the findings. So we're going to go over. And these would be what the documentary really highlighted. And then they kind of didn't talk about nothing else, right? And then Will's going to go over also some things the documentary highlighted that weren't even in the study, right? Which is where problems arise and things like that.
It's just misleading.
But again, the vegan diet did lower the fasting insulin and LDL cholesterol compared to the baseline levels at the start of the study that the participants had. And also their levels weren't high to begin with. Again, we mentioned they started out as healthy. So, that's good, right? Those things lower. Now, the thing is, both groups were in and stayed in a healthy range for all blood work. So fasting insulin, glucose, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, and triglycerides, as well as blood pressure.
So everything was great.
So the reality is with it, both diets were healthy. They didn't make anything bad happen.
Yep.
Just in the 8 weeks, which is short, the vegan group did see essentially a reduction in, again, the fasting insulin and the LDL. Now, the thing with the what was it? With the LDL is, so two things that can affect your LDL cholesterol are eating a little less and or having higher fiber in your diet.
Yeah, because fiber kind of it shuttles cholesterol out. That's one of the
and benefits. Also lowering your saturated fat, right? And the reality is, like, it can probably be, you can connect the reasoning to those specific fats, higher fiber, lower saturated fat. The thing is, you can do both those things as well with an omnivorous diet, like, so.
So not exactly a win, I would say. It's not a bad thing, but it's not,
And in general, they did find that did seem to be the case, because in the study, the vegan group had higher fiber intake. They increased their fiber intake compared to baseline, and their saturated fat intake was decreased to baseline. And whereas the omnivores had their fiber intake increased, but only a gram a day, versus the vegan group that had increased it 10 grams a day. So right off the bat, I would say if you want to have an omnivorous diet and have the same health outcomes that this study had, you could just try increasing your fiber intake 10 grams a day.
Yep. See what happens.
Mm-hmm. They also had both groups. Also, the vegan group decreased their saturated fat intake 13 grams a day, almost 14, 50% decrease from baseline, and the omnivore group decreased their saturated fat almost 7 grams a day, a 23% decrease. So yeah, really the intake and fiber, increase in fiber could be the difference, right? And you could try that. So, and those obviously are things that the documentary did not suggest.
Yeah, it's not going to go that route at all. And the other thing too that like was omitted is the plant-based group also had lower HDL too, which is, quote unquote, the good cholesterol. So basically their overall cholesterol was lower. And that definitely, in my opinion, points to the fiber and the fat.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can that can be not a great thing, right? And they didn't talk about that either. So, if your good cholesterol goes down, that can also affect your immunity and things like that. So from the 8 weeks, those were like two right off the bat, the lower insulin. And that was really in the LDL that they harped on. And they glossed over in the study, right? They mentioned those as positives for the vegan diet, but they also mentioned some negatives, right? And that was, now the negatives are things that probably play out in the longer term.
I think so.
And two that stood out were the protein intake for the vegan group was really low, far from optimal. Also, the adherence was way worse. Right. So that's the other thing, right? You can have best in theory, but is it doable?
Yeah, it's sustainable. Can you do this?
And when you look in the study and you see that there was only minor differences in both groups were healthy, if one of them was way more realistic and sustainable, that may actually be the best choice for most people, right? And then another one, nutrient-wise, was the vegan group, which is already known and you can just supplement for, was really low in B12.
Yeah.
Right? So again, negative consequences over the long term. And then when it comes to the adherence, in addition to adherence, they kind of go hand in hand. The overall diet satisfaction was less in the vegan group. So the overall diet satisfaction dropped 14% and was 20% lower than the omnivore group. So right off there, again, not harped on, not mentioned in the documentary was those negatives, right? Low protein, low B12, less diet satisfaction, and
harder adherence.
And
those are real long-term things. Those start to snowball like over time a little bit more. So I'd be interested to see after, 6 months, what those would look like.
Well, and in reality, there's other studies and stats. That's the problem with going vegan is the adherence rate is low and people rebound back hardcore, right? And then when they do, they don't go eat chicken breast, broccoli. And
they don't just add in lean meats.
They go to, McDonald's and get a bunch of fried food and, go the other route, right?
Yeah.
So, and they even specifically mentioned in the study that the vegan group saw an increase in their preoccupation with food. So that's where like you're eating, right? You're trying to follow this vegan diet and you're probably scrolling and looking at fried chicken and it starts to kind of overwhelm your thoughts, right? So, yeah. So those were with the study. the positives and negatives. And you actually see kind of the takeaways, like overall, they're both healthy. And maybe some of the two benefits of the vegan one could probably actually be achieved with the omnivore one by increasing your fiber intake. And then it really comes down to which approach, since we know they're both healthy, you would probably be the most enjoyable and sustainable for yourself, which, hey, if you listen to our podcast, you've heard that before.
Yeah.
Right? So now let's get into, that's the problem with the documentary is...
You got to church it up somehow.
Yeah, it's entertainment, right? So you are what you eat. Like, you could watch that and just be sold on, oh my gosh, I have to go vegan. And the reality is, the exact study that they based the documentary on didn't come to really those conclusions. No. It wasn't this like thing. And in reality, it's like they were both healthy. Pick the one that that's going to be sustainable, right? And if anything, you could almost argue that the vegan group had more negative consequences. Especially if you want to expand it long term. And that's kind of the bone like that we would pick, right? And then you can go even further. And again, like Will said, churching it up. It's a documentary. It's entertainment.
It's got to draw people in.
It's also funded by Beyond Meat. We've got to really convince people. We want to be polarizing. Mm-hmm. What else did they also kind of do?
So the documentary, they basically showed a couple of positive outcomes that were like not in the publication, the study, right? The study didn't say that any of these things really happened, but basically they showed body composition improving, which, there was very minimal mention of that. Biological age improving, which is just basically like, the health of your organs, your body, all of that kind of stuff. And then a couple of the other ones that they threw in there, changes in gut health, which, we can attribute a lot of times to, an increase in fiber and things like that. But again, wasn't mentioned. And then sexual arousal, which who doesn't want that? Mm-hmm. That also wasn't even in the study either. So they're adding all of these points in like, oh, this is, things that were improved by following this vegan diet. And it's just misleading to attribute that. You're using this study, you're cherry picking a few things, and then you're adding in like, oh, these are even more benefits, and they weren't there. Mm-hmm. So it just paints a way different picture than the actual study does. You know, and that's where the entertainment comes in. It's like that all sounds great and it's appealing, and it leads us to the conclusion that whoever, is making the documentary wants. And that's with any documentary. They're always
and
be
it
like
could
that.
be on the flip side. Say the study was funded by, and this is the problem, you can do this with studies like in data and statistics. If it was funded by U.S. Beef, they probably could have taken the same study and then harped on, the things we just did, and you would have came away with a different takeaway, right? So that's why don't take it for a surface, right? And then what are the takeaways? So for one, again, you've heard this before, but diet doesn't have to be and shouldn't be all or nothing, right? You can eat more, like we said, increase in fiber probably helps. You don't have to give up meat.
Yeah, you can just increase add your fiber and be pretty good.
And someone may harp, well, what's wrong with giving up meat? Well, nothing.
Nothing really.
You can piece together a diet just fine. It's harder.
It's harder to adhere to, as most studies show.
You may enjoy it less. And those two things, like that's why diets kind of can stop working, right? Because you feel like it's just too strict and you can't follow its rules forever, right? So in general, for most people, we found this as well, where there's less rules and restrictions, you get more sustainability, right? So if you can craft a healthy approach that's more enjoyable, that's the way to go, right? You don't watch a documentary and then overnight
change your life.
decide to change everything you're eating, right? Because it's just, you get the facts first.
But that happens every time one of these documentaries comes out, though. Like, they've been so many of them. Like, what was the other one? Forks Over Knives.
Forks Over Knives.
Was that one?
Dude, there's Forks Over Knives, Game Changer.
Game Changers.
You see the theme, you notice? And they're all funded and produced by people that own these companies.
Are there any that are more on the flip side? Like
but
keto,
they're not mainstream.
Low carb type stuff.
There's been a couple, but you gotta like go watch them on YouTube. You know,
yeah.
There's one with like cows. You know, just talking about that industry and how actually.
I remember that one.
Yeah, but
that one was interesting.
Because the reality is the money is not there. You know, there's economic factors, there's political factors, right? You know, and it goes into politics a little, right? Like, in general, the media is normally a little more left-leaning, right? And so that's why. But at the same time, right, you can go and right-leaning stuff goes into conspiracy theories that end up, you know, not sharing all the sides too, right?
Exactly.
It's like...
It's messy.
Yeah, it's messy on both sides. That's why you should always educate yourself and look deeper and
kind of look at the root. Like, read the study instead of just watching a documentary and see, like, what does it actually say? And
realize, as with most stuff, especially nowadays, because it gets polarization always gets more attention.
Oh, it sells.
So you may be able to take something like, like this vegan documentary, like, man, I should eat more plants, right? And like, you probably should. And
that's actually a good takeaway.
Having a plant-based diet is great, but you don't have to give up meat. And there's can be negatives to it to do that.
Yeah.
You know? So, again, you know, ditch the all or nothing, right?
Yeah. And it's just, man, like anything, extreme things sell because they give us a certain type of feeling, and I get it.
And then realize, okay, maybe it does spark you to make some nutrition changes. That's great. Realize there's going to be a learning curve, right? Whether with, for example, this study, vegan or omnivore, both of them were eating more whole unprocessed foods.
Yeah.
They lowered the saturated fat in their diets, so they were eating like leaner meats or none, and they all had, like, again, both of them ended up with good results, healthy results. And like the documentary did not mention, there was some longer term benefits with the adherence, with the protein intake, things like that, to the omnivorous one. But even then, if you do that, you're going to have to give yourself grace, because
you have to.
Typically, it's going to mean like cooking more food, preparing more food, finding meals you like. And you see in the study, like, they had the advantage of the first 4 weeks. They knew it's hard to change a diet. They just gave them the food, and then when they switched them to, like, okay, we're going to put you in control, they still gave them a nutritionist to help them shop and cook. You know, right? So.
They had so many.
Focus more on, like, what it's going to take to make those changes, not like I have to follow, this strict polarizing approach.
Yeah, it's, man.
And then ultimately, it doesn't matter which one you pick. You know, if you went vegan, plant-based, or omnivorous, you can be fine with both. What's more important is minimally processed foods. You know, so you're probably preparing more of your foods. You're getting enough lean protein, and you're getting some produce, right?
Boom.
And then when you break that down further, so minimally processed foods, lean protein, produce. You can do that on a vegan or omnivorous. What type of foods are appealing to you, right? Like,
what are your values too?
What type of meals are appealing to you? What type of lifestyle is appealing to you? Then go the direction that falls into, right? Which one's going to be more sustainable? And that is where you're going to find success.
Boom.
So don't get caught up with, like, polarizing opinions.
Yeah, don't get swept away.
Yeah. If something you watch ends up feeling like the conclusion is an all or nothing approach,
or it just feels like a commercial,
then dig deeper.
Yeah. And it, something that might seem daunting, because we're lucky to kind of have been in it for a long time. Like, we tell people, hey, like, check the study out. That can be a lot for somebody. Like, scientific literacy is not something that, like, the whole world has.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you can find, like, read the abstract.
Yeah.
Like, the abstract of a study is generally like a summary, and it gives you all the finer points of what they found, what they were looking for, all that kind of stuff. So you can at least read that. Yeah. You don't have to read through the methods if you're not quite there, you don't understand it, but you can always find that.
Yeah, and this one's is simple. Like you can literally see in the documentary they highlight it, 2 benefits of vegan diet, and add it more, and didn't talk about any negatives. And you could read the study and see, wait a second, that's not. Some of these things weren't even in here, and then right here it says it has these negatives that weren't even mentioned. Mm-hmm. So obviously the goal of the documentary wasn't to accurately
depict the study
and lay it out there for you to decide. Mm-hmm. The goal of the documentary was to scare you and to give you your decision. Mm-hmm. Right? So
yeah. So I think it's important with any type of media consumption is to like look for the takeaways, but don't take it as the gospel.
Yeah. And that's what's good about we are in this industry that fitness, exercise, nutrition. So we truly are able to know this stuff at a level to know the kind of BS indicator. And I always have to remind myself of that when they have documentaries of complete other realms that I know nothing about. It is easy. I totally get it.
Oh, I get it too. Because when you're not knowledgeable,
you can be like, oh my gosh, and you see all this, but then I remind myself, like, no, there's a whole nother layer, and this is probably silly, and maybe again, it can spark your interest, and then to dig deeper, or give you even some motivation to get started with that process. But typically, any Netflix documentary, an entertainment company,
there's something
is on the surface is not going to be the answer per se.
Yeah. Do you remember? This is the first documentary I remember because it was kind of, right after high school, I was getting into fitness. Food Inc. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
That was the one where they showed, and I will say, this is one that made people just not want to eat meat ever again. Mm-hmm. But it was the one where they showed the food processing plants and stuff, and everyone was just like, oh no, and they were spraying like pig, I don't know if it was poop or whatever on these, this land. Anyways, that one was like a very early one, and I really do remember that. But it may have highlighted, hey, these practices might not be the best. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean like, hey, this is terrible and you shouldn't do this ever, but like, well, maybe we should rethink this. So there's always maybe something you can get out of one of these documentaries, but yeah, don't look to it for to be your shining beacon of truth.
There was like a series.
Dude, I got them all up right now.
I know. There's so many food documentaries.
There's a lot.
And they're all either like vegan slanted or like keto slanted. Mm-hmm. There's like the magic pill.
That sugar film.
The sugar film.
What is
Food
that?
Inc. What's with wheat. Dude, but there was one, and now it's going to bother me.
What was it about?
If I was to suggest one to watch, I remember watching one. I was like, "This is the best one I've seen." But it was like a
mini series.
A mini series with like 10 episodes of all random topics. But then there was one on nutrition.
Oh, I watched this, and I don't remember what it was.
And it really broke down the one study of like fat versus carbs, and
they did a good job.
They came out equal as long as I
kind of wanted more.
Man, what was it?
Dude, what is it called? Because it was like just like an informational. Each episode was a whole different topic, right?
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about.
And it was at least 5 years ago. Let's see.
Explained?
Yes. I think it was the Explained series. So
I think that was it.
It was the Explained series.
Cryptocurrency. Why diets fail? Is that the one you're talking about?
Fail,
boom.
Yeah.
That was a good episode.
Did you have the season and episode there?
Yeah. So it's the
Explained season.
It's the first season. And it is episode number 6.
Why diets fail.
Yep. Hey, you were right. Or you were close. It was 2018, June. So like
6 years, yeah.
5.5 years, 6 years.
Yep.
You're bad, man. That was good.
Yeah.
You nailed that down.
I know that because I remember watching it when I was in California. So I knew that was at least about 4 or 5 years ago.
I'm interested now. I haven't watched it since that first season.
Yeah.
There's one in the second season called The Future of Meat.
I think that one talks about, they got real hot with the, where they make meat
The like lab grown meat.
The lab grown meat, but that's gotten shut down a lot because it
has.
I saw a documentary on it recently.
I haven't heard a lot about it recently, actually.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to they just don't know. There's so much unknown because the reality is like, you know, put all the environmental, animal welfare things aside. Like, meat is pretty amazing, right? Because
it is.
You take a cow and it eats the grass. The cow can digest
the nutrients,
assimilate the way we can't, and then it turns into the cow, and then we eat the meat and get all this nutrition. There's a lot of nutrition in meat. We've talked about this if you go back. And so if you don't have that component, that cycle, that process,
are we missing a lot of the nutrition?
Are you even getting the nutrition?
Or
right?
is it just essentially it's like a protein supplement?
Yeah.
You know, or fat protein supplement, you know?
Yeah. And even protein supplement, you get calcium, you get a lot of nutrition. So it would almost be more like take something that's like, you know, almost like sugar, right? Like say like sugar and it's normal, so it comes from sugar cane and there's probably some like potassium and some nutrients in it, but then eventually gets filtered into the pure white sugar. It's just carbs.
Yeah.
Right. So what if, and there's no micronutrition, what if the meat's kind of like that, right? Ends up being no micronutrition and it's just some protein.
That's
right?
the really tricky part that they're.
And then the other thing was, the other main factor is more expensive than.
Yeah, it's real, like, resource heavy.
Yeah, it's like cheaper. Just so what it's trying to do, it's like, is it even helpful, right? Like,
yeah. And the tricky part is a lot of times technology starts out like that and may get better to where it's efficient over time, but as it is, it's not.
Yeah.
So there's another one. This would actually be kind of an interesting one to watch. Season 3 called Sugar. A history of sugar and other synthetic sweeteners. Debates the health question around sugar, showing myths and facts about its consumption.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go watch that now. Ah, dang.
And you'll see, right, it makes sense. Like, Explained was like, obviously they're touching on a bunch of different stuff. So it's not like some specifically funded agenda written.
They hit literally everything. I mean, they got weed, tattoos, political correctness, music, dancing. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to have like one, you know, or specific interest for all of those things that are paying for it. So, dude, they had one. Damn. This seems too real. November 7th, 2019.
Stop.
It's called The Next Pandemic. What? I'm going to watch it. I need to know.
I remember watching it now because I've seen all of those.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is kind of creepy now that I think about it.
Damn, that is a little bit weird.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, when it happened, I think I'd recently watched it.
And you were like, what?
And I was like, yo, they just talked about this.
Did they know?
If I'm not mistaken, it talked about how like we're just ill-prepared and naive.
Which is what we found.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Dang.
All
right. Big takeaways. Don't trust everything you read or watch. It can be entertaining too. Like, there's nothing wrong with watching something for entertainment purposes, but don't let it run your life.
And fine, again, we like when, you know, matches up with our message, but
it usually does. Feel good about it.
Sustainability is a huge factor.
It's key.
You got to find something that you can stick with and
something that's realistic.
Keep it up. And it's normally not the extremes.
And you know what? Here, for someone who's like, because a lot of people go to the extreme, they're like, oh, I'm just going to do a vegan diet. I'm cutting out all meat. I'm adding in fruits and vegetables. Well, if you're even remotely interested in that, I would recommend to what you're currently doing, just add fruits and veg. And then you might transition from there because then you're building up those habits rather than like, I'm just going to jump into the deep end. I'm going to change my whole life. Not as sustainable. So do that and see how that feels and then decide, is it reasonable for me to go even farther than this? Or is this great and I feel good and I'm fine?
Yeah.
So I think that's a better path than just jumping into the deep end if, you know, you're not sure about it, because sustainability is probably the biggest factor.
Yeah, one thing they mentioned was how people in the vegan group just struggled going out to eat and stuff.
It's hard.
And socially.
Unless you're going to a vegan restaurant, it's very hard to do.
Well, you have to almost change your whole lifestyle.
You do.
People you hang around with, like, because not everyone's going to want to go.
Yeah. to a vegan restaurant, which I get.
And then you got to like ask, for a lot of changes and stuff like that. And
most places, there's not that many options. You go to your big cities, of course there is, but most of the world doesn't have that.
Yeah. I mean, most of the world, most places in America you could do all right. Like there's always options, like a Chipotle somewhere and things like that, but where you could get vegan, but
still it's harder.
Now this is our personal bias, right? So this shows when it comes down to like, okay, food preference and enjoyability. Like whenever I see the vegan sub at Subway, it makes me sad, man.
Yeah.
It's like cucumbers and bell peppers and lettuce,
It looks like the least satisfying thing
like, hey,
ever. It's like you're just eating a veggie tray. Like, here's your appetizer.
Because don't get me wrong, like, I could be somewhat happy, like, something like more hearty when you get like a lentil stew or like a
classic beans and rice. That's filling and good. Sticks to you.
There's some meals that I could enjoy. Now,
for sure,
long term, I'd eventually miss other things that way out. But like in that moment, or if I'm with a friend or had to get something, cool. But some things I see like that, and I'm just like, oh man.
Or like eating just like a salad. That's it.
Yeah.
Like no amount of veggies is going to make me satisfied.
Yeah.
I might be a little full, but I'm going to be wanting something else. And it's just, this is more just how we personally feel.
And I mean, it makes sense because you're missing essential amino acids, right?
Yeah.
Which we have a strong drive for.
We have a big drive
for. Which it makes sense why meals like beans or rice, lentil stew feel more hearty because they do actually have.
They do provide the full profile.
The full profile, right?
So, they have like a decent amount of fiber and you're getting your amino acids. Like, that's why.
Some other new studies have come out recently with a little bit of a tangent, but comparing, expect more like with building muscle and things like that. And like, essentially the more protein is like a catch-22 a little bit. Like so if you eat enough protein, consume enough protein. So if you consume little protein, it seems like
it matters more.
It matters more the source. So like animal foods would be more helpful. But the higher your protein intake gets up there, the less it matters more. But the hard thing is you have to eat a lot more food to get the higher protein from
a vegan diet,
plants.
Yeah.
Right. So if you could end up, say, eating 150 grams from plants, is almost basically equal to omnivorous diet as far as protein quality.
Yeah.
But when you then dive into, okay, how am I going to get to this like 150 grams of protein?
It's harder.
It's a lot harder. So, and as we've mentioned before, the reality is a vegan diet can be great and have no difference.
Yeah.
But you have to eat really hard at it. You have to plan more meticulously. It's a lot more difficult.
You're not going to accidentally hit that 150 on a vegan diet. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, we meet with clients all the time who are omnivorous.
And they don't accidentally hit it.
And they struggle hitting a good optimal amount of at least like 80 to 100, 120 grams.
Yeah.
And that's with meats on the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
So then add into like, we're not doing meat. It's so much harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you'll see some people on like a vegan diet and man, their protein's probably 20, 30 grams.
Yeah, they're just eating like veggies.
They're literally eating like
lettuce and cucumbers.
Like rabbit food, essentially. You know,
like
there's no protein in
seeds.
So disclaimer: there's protein. It's just like
incomplete
a gram.
Yeah, or like a few grams.
Before somebody comes after me.
So then and then all these foods typically are also carbohydrate foods. So then you get into total calories gets harder to control because, okay, well, I'm going to eat enough of these foods to hit the protein, but then all of a sudden your total calories gets really high.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a difficult balance.
But yeah.
So we're not saying it's bad. It's just harder. That's all.
It's just harder.
That's it.
But then if you feel way better, you know, not eating animal foods and these meals are more enjoyable and you can make it work and you're like, I got this for the long term.
Cool.
Awesome choice.
Yeah.
Awesome decision.
Yeah. Do it.
But don't do it because
this documentary told you to.
Netflix told you to do it. Or because, what was this one called? Oh, sorry.
Which one?
The new one.
The new one? You Are What You Eat.
You Are What You Eat. You are what you eat.
I guarantee you next year there's going to be another one. And when you watch it, just, you know, have maybe a different outlook or maybe you're looking through different glasses at it this time, and you can see see it for what it's worth.
You know what I noticed with the Beyond Meat at the Lidl? It started out when it came out. They had it front and center in the meat.
It's in the back now.
On the end cap, nah, bro. It was. Then they moved it to the back. You know where I saw it recently?
Where?
Freezer.
Oh, so it's not selling as quick.
Yeah,
interesting.
They put it in the freezer section.
Didn't they? I feel like they struggled recently, or like financially.
Oh yeah, I mean, let's see.
They had definitely a boom essentially. I mean, we call it a boom for them, but then I think they really like started to struggle. Yeah. When was that they started to struggle? 2022.
So it came out and basically May 2019 boomed from 66 to 234. So 60 to like 400 increase.
It's like a 350% increase.
And this was before things got funky with COVID to July 2019. So yeah, May, June, yeah, a couple months, right? It like tripled, quadrupled. And then from there basically went down, went back up again in like 2020, like late 20, when everything kind of went up. And then it's basically crashed. It's down to, dude, it's at 7. And it opened.
It's at 7?
Yeah, at 6.
Oh, they're not doing good.
It opened at 66.
They're not doing good.
Nah.
I mean, it's an expensive product.
That's the thing. It's more expensive than like Premier beef, and then it doesn't taste as good.
It's not as good.
It tastes as good.
It's a hard sell.
Yeah.
You know,
you better whip out that documentary and scare people into eating it.
Yeah, that is. I wonder if there's any other companies out there in the same exact position or doing the same thing that are maybe doing better. It's got to be hard. What are I don't know what the other companies are that make.
Yeah, I mean, there's one
plant-based meat.
I feel like there's Impossible Foods.
Impossible,
that's really
yeah.
the only other.
So
other
they got in with like restaurants and stuff. They got lucky, like I think Burger Kings and Dunkin' Donuts and things like that.
But do any of those even make those? Remember, Burger King came out with the Impossible Burger. Is it still on the menu?
I've been to Burger King in 10 years. I don't know. Look it up. Impossible Burger.
Do they have a stock? I don't think they're public. No, they're not.
They're not? Okay.
No.
Impossible Burger. Let's see. Restaurants.
That money will let you know.
Does Burger King still sell? Yeah, they still sell it in select locations.
Probably in Los Angeles.
Red Robin, White Castle. But that was almost 4 years ago. So,
you know what I wondered? Like, though, do you think they cook it on a different flat top or grill?
I feel like they would have to.
Because, then it wouldn't be vegan.
Because then it'd be cross-contaminated.
You can't cook it in, like...
Beef fat.
They would have
to have a separate section for it.
But then do you trust?
No.
so then it's like, even the people who are diehard going to eat an Impossible Burger...
It's like, man, that might have a little beef fat on it.
They're not going to go...
That's why it's so good.
Go to Burger King. Yeah, like, this is Impossible Burger.
This is it, baby.
I don't know, man. Just make it yourself.
I feel like I had one of those. Like, I was curious and bought it. I think maybe it was Beyond. And, it wasn't bad.
Remember when you were a kid, the hamburgers at school, they were soy burgers, right?
They were soy burgers?
I don't know.
Maybe I didn't know.
I don't know.
There's no way they were soy burgers.
Yeah, you're right.
Soy burger?
You know, your kids tell you stuff. Someone probably told me that.
They told you that. It stuck with you this whole time?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Nah, I think they were beef, man. There might be some other stuff in there. There might be a little soy mixed in to pad the stats.
They had that weird texture, though, right?
There's like soy and wheat in the burger.
I don't know.
That would be more likely than just a soy patty. Like
the vegan chicken nuggies.
Yeah, you know what, though? Those are good. Whitney used to eat those all the time, and I would have some.
I mean, it makes more sense, right? Because you get the breading and they're fried, right? So you're gonna it helps to
it helps it be more palatable.
Yeah,
but they were good enough.
Yeah.
If I was vegan, that's all I would eat.
Just some nuggets,
just chicken nuggets with some soy protein.
What do they call them though? You can't call them chicken nuggies.
It's like they spell it wrong or spell it different. It's like chicken with a K.
Chicken, yeah, and it's like apostrophe N.
Yeah. Yeah, so then they're on a technicality, you're not
That's
getting
my pet
caught.
peeve, man. When businesses they name their business with like the incorrect spelling on purpose.
Yeah, it kills me. Please don't.
Although, if your name was like James and you had a gym, and you named it Jim,
That would be topical and funny. Yeah, that's fine.
Jim's Gym,
Jim's Jim.
Jim's Gym. That's why I named my son James.
James,
Set him
give
up.
him some chances.
Let him know, hey, this is your plan.
This is what we're gonna do.
Jim's Gym. All right, that's it. That's all we got.
Let's get out of here.
We'll catch you later.
Yeah, see ya. As always, thanks for listening, guys. If you want to learn more, check us out at coastalfitnessva.com or garydeagle.com. We'll see you next time.